The name of the author?
Yeah.
Ibn Tufayl. I think it's in the invitation. Message.
In the title of
the title of the story is the story of Hayy ibn Qadhan.
Is it in the program that is circulating?
No.
Yes.
Yes, I think.
So somebody can spell it out, because not everybody has the.
Yeah, because it's yes, it is written here in the announcement.
We didn't get the announcement.
Not everybody got the announcement, so we'll
okay, maybe can make photocopy. Yeah.
you can pass it.
Written more, yeah, much better than pronounce it, because I pronounce it in Arabic. That's really the name of the author and the name of.
Yes, is this a question? Maybe you can use the microphone to, if you have a question, but you are leaping forward. No?
Yes.
Then use the microphone, please. Turn it, just push the button. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for your lecture. I was wondering about the definition for postsecularism that you offered. Are you referring to return of religion to the society, or you have a broader definition of it in that?
No, I'm referring to the returning this revivalism of religion and returning of religion and religious thought back into the society.
The return of the religions in the public sphere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yes, I would like to ask something about the concept of nature, because you said that in Quran it was not so much the use of nature, but more contemplation. And maybe you could explain something more about that and compare it to the Bible as far as you know. I mean, spontaneously I would say there's a big difference then, because in the Bible it's more like you use nature. People, man might make use of nature. Thanks.
Yeah, it is in the Quran, in the way view of the Quran, that everything is created to be under the disposal of humans. The humans are the center of the Quranic views, and everything is created, animals, planets, sky, moon, etc., for the humans. But in the meantime, okay, it's presented as a series of signs. Okay, for example, it's the imperative look, or why don't you look, or why don't you think, followed by certain description of culture, very, very obvious in the Quran. So it's not only a subject to nature, not only to use or to consume it, but also to wonder, to think about. If, for example, in certain verses of the Quran, it's talking about the beauty of animals. Okay, and also animals are intended for the human to use, to ride. But it's when the Quran, even in this context, say, well, look to its beauty. So there is some difference in the way, in the Quranic way view concerning nature, concerning the cosmos, concerning the structure of the cosmos. Unfortunately, this topic is not really, studied very well in the Quran because of the focus on the Sharia aspect. There is more focus on the Sharia aspect of the Quran, which is only 12% of the entire Quran. I think the only person who wrote about this is Zayd, the ideologue of the most fundamentalist Egyptian ideologue. But he started as a literary critic. So he was very much a scholar of literature, of narrative, and he, in his commentary on the Quran, sometimes forgot his ideology and his literary taste, you know, overwhelmed him, and he presented a real. I think in his commentary he presented this nature in the Quran in a very remarkable way.
Satisfied for the moment? More clarification, what do you mean? Questions, very large questions in store, but that is for the public debate, open debate afterwards. No? Shall we have a brief breathing and a legal rights break and return within 10-15 minutes for the discussion? Thank you very much.
I believe you.
Waar mensen met een... ik kan het je verschaffen als je dat wilt. Dus vertel even aan terug. Oké, dan doen we het.
We're now going to take this line down. Door shut, please, if it's possible, and have a think with the door open. Thank you very much for coming back, refreshed by your caffeine abuses. The floor is open for the general discussion. There's a lot of material on the table, and some of the discussions were already starting. So maybe we should sort of, without cutting into them, ask the people who had already begun out there to pursue it in public. Is that Vicar there who's looking fidgety? Please.
Well, I was asking if it's possible for Professor Zayd to develop a little more on the way in which he extrapolates the idea of discussion within the elite and discussion within the larger public to our modern times, because what she's suggesting in my view is that we can have some kind of extrapolation towards the discussion and the debate of our days, and I would be very interested in hearing him elaborate on that.
Well, I think, I mean, I have been for some time, like everyone, very satisfied with my academic environment and this discussion of lectures until, against my own will, I became a public figure. Okay, it took me some time to accept that I should accept the fact that I'm not only an intellectual, but I have to be involved in this public debate about religion. And in a way, I was afraid, okay, to be honest, how to say this provocative for the religious feeling, how to be sincere to your academic conclusions, and to reveal it to the public in a way that would not cause any kind of insult this was my real concern, because during my experience in Egypt, I have realized it was very, very easy, as it happened in history, to take certain ideas and to just reduce them to very small phrase and to say, well, this is what this man is saying, that the Quran is a cultural product. And when a Muslim, okay, unable to read my book, and you just say, well, cultural product, what do you mean? This was invented by Muhammad or something like that. But anyway, I realized that using the media, or being able to be present in the media, that I can reach more audience than by books. So I have to find a way. And here I learned a lot from this narrative. How can you express your very, very deep concepts in a communicative language that would not cause any kind of misunderstanding? This is what I think that what is needed. We have two languages here, the language of the elite and the language as it is used in everyday communication for people, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. How to find a middle language that would not sacrifice the depth of idea to popularization. Okay, because there is a lot of popularization. People who, for example, preach in intellectual tone. There is a lot of preaching in seemingly intellectual language. And I think this is the real challenge. And just I came from Egypt last week, and I was invited for a TV program. I only accept TV programs when they are at air, no recording.
Live.
Alive. It is alive. And I was surprised that I was able to bring an issue like what is religious truth? Truth here. What is religious truth? And I was able to say in this TV interview that there is no such absolute truth about religion. It's true because you believe it. It's a question of believing. And I explained that it does exist in this kind of relationship. It is not there, the truth, it is not here. It's in this connection between the believer and the subject. Therefore, I have to respect the truth of the other, because it is built on the same connectivity between what I believe. For me, I couldn't imagine that I was able to say that, to relativize the religious truth. And I was also very happy because people did not feel, all the response I had, that people were very happy. They did not feel that I am committing heresy or committing disbelief or something like that. How to do this in books also? I mean, this is a big question. We have to fight ourselves here as intellectuals, okay, in order to be able to communicate through the media, through the internet, through TV, satellite, whatever, public debate, public lecture, whatever. This is the only challenge that make or shrink the distance between intellectual debate and public awareness.
Can I ask one more follow-up question, which is, this is a strange question, but maybe you allow me to, I hope you will not be frightened by it. My question will be, what would you suggest for pure Occidentals? I mean, the way I heard your talk, I thought it was a very flowering talk, and a little Middle Eastern, let us say. And it's true also of the story of Ibn Tufayl. And I think for a pure Occidental it would be more difficult to have such a flowering way of speaking. Do you understand what I mean when I asked you what you yourself have found in this narrative inspiration for a more public way of talking? And do you have an idea about what this would mean for a more occidentally oriented mind, exclusively occidentally minded? Can I make myself understood?
I think it is a question, I mean, all of you have to answer, because I'm talking to the already occidentally oriented, already public.
Yeah.
I'm not talking to Middle Eastern or Egyptian.
That is right.
Okay, so if this kind of flowering, I don't know if flowering is positive or negative.
Positive in my mind.
Yeah, but I wonder if this flowering discourse was communicated properly to you here or not. I mean, it's not for me to say, but it's for you, because you are Occidental-oriented audience.
There is an intervention on this point.
Yes, I just wanted to react on this because the picture you're sketching about Western thinking as non-flowering, I would really object to. And within the Western tradition, there is a lot of flower speech, and I mean the whole postmodernism, for instance, but also I think anything in the romantic intellectual discourse has a flower form. So I think I cannot go along with your opposition of Occidental and Oriental thinking that way.
Well, Vika was probably putting words in your mouth, speaking certainly in the public domain in Western society. You would have a lot more authority if you are factual, cut and dry, than if you speak allegorically. I think that if you speak to parables or prophecies or proverbs, which Catholics are prone to do far more than Protestants, admittedly, but since the question of the gravitas of the public intellectual, you're not encouraged to be flowery, no.
But it depends also on what kind of audience you have. If you are in academia, of course you have to use all this kind of terminology to speak a language which sometimes I don't understand myself. Really, I mean, sometimes I have the courage to say, oh, I'm 65 years old. When I don't understand, I say, I don't understand. I don't have to pretend that I understand. But if you are in more outside the academia, of course, this kind of metaphoric using anecdotes is possible. And about the authority, yeah, I do agree with you. It makes you very creative. But I think intellectuals also have to fight against their authority.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult fight. I mean,
yes.
I was thinking about how would Herman Felix react. And it would be a strong fight against him about this purely intellectual kind of debating. And that's the questions which I ask myself also.
As an Enlightenment fundamentalist, Herman Felix does not shine for his ability to engage in dialogue. We are giving him a slot next year because he's actually asked for a slot in the postsecular lecture series, and to prove that I believe in academic freedom, I think, well, I'm caught here, and of course you're going to have a slot, but I've sat in dialogue with Fatima Mernissi, and it was painful and embarrassing, the extent to which he did not enter the dialogue. He knows that we're good buddies, so we fight this out regularly, but just an annotation. Welcome back.
Yes, I want to react to that again, to Hermann Felix and the Enlightenment fundamentalists. Well, he is very tightly connected with Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and she has recently written an article about Romanticism and reacted very strongly about the whole movement of Romanticism. And this is connecting to the flower speech again, because I think the whole Romanticism and the Romantic intellectual is a very strong thread in the European tradition and leads also to postmodernism. These kind of people who are harsh rationalists indeed do not like this tradition, but it is a big and strong tradition within Western thinking. So I think we should emphasize this.
So you're making the same point as before, you're just reiterating?
Well, I'm connecting it to what she said. Yeah.
I have several points I want to raise, but the audience goes first. Welcome. Say your name so that we know who we're talking to.
My name is Omar Nahas. I'm academic director of School for International Training. But I wonder, you told us about coming or becoming a public person or person who's known in the Netherlands because you are in the media now. My question is, how can we help the the people who are in the field and already doing social and great work on social issues, different social issues, how can we help them to get academic degrees in order to become of more authority? So the opposite of what you did.
I don't know how to help them to get academic degree, because this is, academia has its very restricted rules, but I can think of a training program. I mean, to provide those activists who are working on the field, on social issues, religious issues, human rights issues, gender rights issues, etc., all these issues. I can think of a training program, if it comes to knowledge about Islam, for example. I can think about that, of training program, and hopefully this will be successful, engaged in a possible training program to be held the first time in Indonesia, in which scholars, I mean PhD scholars as well as activists would attend the training program in order to provide them with the necessary knowledge that would empower their knowledge in order to be able to work more efficiently in the field, including, I hope, some preachers of the mosque. But I cannot think of, of the way to as for example, there is a lot of people who would like to have a PhD, but there is a regulation in universities about the requirement, in different universities, of course, requirement to be enrolled in a PhD degree. This is always a problem. But I don't think that it would, I mean, academic degree would not give you any authority. I mean, I think knowledge would give you power. Knowledge is power. I think academic degrees are now, as we say in Arabic, are everywhere.
I'll look in the direction of Sarah Barker, who should intervene, but if I could, do you want to go now? One of the constant concerns of this lecture series has been the multiple possible definitions of the post-secular predicament, or the post-secular conditions. How many possible ways do we have of looking at it? What are the axes along which the multiple terms and definitions could be organized? And I think in your lecture, I think the post-secular predicament would be, in my language, the return of the religions or the staying on of the religions in the public sphere. And I think this is the question that was asked in question mine before. Now, if we take it for the sake of today's lecture, if you come to other lectures, we will have other definitions. If we take this as our guiding line, then a number of issues emerge. You said one you mentioned yourself. In Europe, in the Western tradition that Europe somewhat represents, the struggle to, shall we say, eliminate the religious from the public sphere, or to contain the impact of the religious from the public sphere, has been momentous. And depending on what your politics, your religious belief, your ethics are, you may feel differently about it. You may think this has been precisely the Enlightenment struggle for secularism, progress and modernization, or you may think it is a lie and a failed project and a piece of hypocrisy. We can discuss, but nonetheless I think it is a historical feature of our culture. Since the 17th, 18th century, the religious in the public domain does not have the authority that it had previously. And even there has been, in some cases, a streak of vehement atheism and militant anti-clericalism as elements of the European public sphere. This is a major difference, for instance, with the USA. In the public debate in the USA, it is absolutely dominated by religion and always has. I believe that the USA is the most Christian country in the world. Not so Europe. We are radical skeptics, agnostics, atheists, and in my case, proud of it. Nonetheless, and I'm pushing this as this is my role in this series to really drive this home. If it is a feature, if it's a series of course, if it is a feature of our historicity that this is where we're coming from the struggle to contain the religious and clerical authority, because religion is one thing, churches and clergy is another, to contain them from the public domain. And think Spinoza and his struggle against the Jewish orthodoxy of the days. Think of the multiple radical saints of the Christian tradition, all of them inevitably burned at the stakes, and because they dare to sort of clash with the authority of the Pope. So anti-clericalism on the one hand, atheism or agnosticism on the other. If this is the case, how can I, with all the admiration and incredible respect I have for you, get interested in holy texts again? If you see what I mean.
Well, I agree with the distinction between clerics and religion, between church and Christianity, between imams, okay, and Islam. And here comes the concept of experience of spirituality as individual, and with the right of this individual to be present in the public sphere. I am, as again as an intellectual and as a thinker, I am opposing any kind of authoritative practice, okay, to claim authority, even in the classroom. Even the teacher in the secondary school, okay, to claim authority and to dictate ideas. This is not, the productive way of developing a healthy society at all. So let the church be like that. Let the imams be. The imams need training. Okay. Well, it's not that that important. If you are agnostic or atheist or whatever you are, to get you back to to religion or to enjoy the scripture again and again. This should not be an issue. Okay. Otherwise, we will return it back to the da'wah. That every person is candidate to be a believer. This is behind all the missionary work, not only in the history of Christianity, but in the history of Islam as well. Every individual, even if he belongs or she belongs to another religion, is a candidate converter. So we have to work on that. I would like to have atheists and agnostics in the society. Without agnosticism and atheism, religion would dry off. Without heresy, and this is the history of every religion. If religion exists and dominates, and these voices are extinguished, religion gradually will die away. Okay, the history of every religion is the history of people rethinking, practicing heresy, sometimes disbelief or whatever it is, and this will renew the way religion reinterpret itself and represent itself again. So everyone is needed. Maybe someday, okay, you think, okay, I will take this Quran and say, when you take the Quran to read it, you don't read it out of vacuum. You are directed by a certain pre-reading about Islam, about Quran, about and it does matter whom you have read. It's very much like I take the Bible. Okay, I take the Bible and read it. So the question is how to enhance, develop respect for religious experience, for religiosity, and I insist in religiosity. People would like very much to be religious, and religious does not necessarily to follow the tenet of the literal tenet of this of this religion or that religion. My wife is very, very religious person. I am not that very religious person. She went to Hajj last year, okay? And everyone was surprised. How can my wife go to Hajj? Okay? And they were expecting her, upon returning back from Hajj, to have a headscarf. She did not. Okay, because she does not think that this is the tenet of Islam. She wants to Hajj for a spiritual experience. How to empower, the believers, to look into their own faith in this individualistic way. This is the real challenge. Rather than looking into the institutions, I hate institutions very much. I do hate institutions very, very much. Because the moment you have these institutions, you have everything blocked. They tell you how to dress, how to speak, what kind of language you use. Okay, we need some system, but not an institution. When it comes to religious institutions, we are in a big dogma. And they are the guardians of dogmas. If you speak, and I have so many occasions to be invited to this kind of dialogue among religion or religious dialogue or whatever it is. And I found myself invited to present Islam, which I don't believe I present. I don't believe any person would present a religion with this history like Islam. So I find myself in a prison, in some sort, I have to defend Islam. Or within the rabbi, talking about the beauty of Judaism, within the minister, talking about Jesus and the Prince of Peace, etc., etc. I have to do something funny like that about the institutions are dogma, and people who are working with dogma are enemies of history. Scholars have to study religion in its historical context, and we have to distribute this knowledge to the believers, to empower the believers according to the history in which they live, and to defend the right of every individual to be non-religious, atheist, agnostic, whatever it is. Well, on an open society, okay, we can have a very, very rich, productive discussion, dialogue that would reach even the religious knowledge.
Thank you very much.
Well, when I was a student many years ago, I was taught about literature that you go through different stages. That after reading novels, you begin to read, when you grow older, you begin to read history, and then later on biographies. Now, thinking about spiritualism, it seems to me that one is going through the same kind of phase, that you come from either religious or deistic background, and that gradually turning into an agnostic, and in later stages, like you saw in the debate with Professor Maso, you turn to spiritualism and even to the belief that there is something after death. The basic problem and question for me then is, what do the large stories, the Bible, the Quran, etc., have to do with this later stage of spiritualism, assuming that I'm right and I see you nodding, that that there are these stages in life?
Well, scriptures, as far as I can see, are a narrative. They are composition of narratives, of anecdotes, of allegories. Of course, we don't know exactly how the first generation have read these narratives. Okay, if they have read it literally or believed in it literally or not. This is another question. How different generations were able to communicate with this scripture. I will talk from my experience as a scholar of the Quran. The Quran is a book, is a very, very complex book, which consists of narratives, stories, anecdotes, allegories, okay, poetics, as well as certain legal advice and ethical and moral advice. Okay? It's a composition of diversity of discourses. Okay? And to understand the Quran this way, or to look to the Quran, yeah, there is, I think, something in the Quran that still convey meaning to my modern life. I spoke about nature, for example, the Quranic view of nature. Okay, how this, for example, could be relevant. I mean, for the believer, I'm talking here, not for everyone. Okay, because at the end, the Quran is the book for the believer, for the people who believe in it. Okay, for the non-believer, people who do not believe the Quran is a very boring book. Yes, I mean, this is a fact. I mean, sometimes as a scholar, and I would like to make a distance between what I'm studying, and so I go to a translation of the Quran. I read it in English. Okay, because when I read it in Arabic, it's me. It's part of my, being brought up. It's my, So the Bible would always have something to say for the believer. It does not mean it has to say the same thing for everyone. And it is not, I mean, the believer should also know that whatever they get from their sacred book, it's because they believe in this sacred book. So its relevance here is connected with the believer. Maybe you read the Quran, for example, from a literary point of view, okay, and you find it interesting in some parts of it, as a literary expression, as a storytelling. Okay, you might, okay, but you don't have to. Okay, this goes also for the Gospel and for Bible and all the scriptures of the Word.
Sarah, you were coming in?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Zayd, for your lecture. I want to ask a question about the political and intellectual stakes of Islamic Reformation. And I think it's interesting, I was laughing, Rosie, when you asked your question, because in a way, my question is going to be a different one, but in a way, we are enacting the positioning of liberal Islam and the kind of different kind of criticisms that are fired at the project, right? Or liberal Islam or reformed Islam. So of course there is a question, the line of questioning that Rosie already asked. Of course we all know that there is a line of questioning from more strictly orthodox Islamic experiences and readings. And then I would actually like to put for you another critical line, let's say from a certain post-structuralist engagement with religion, kind of applying, I don't know, power, knowledge, Foucauldian frameworks on the study of religion. And I'm thinking in particular of somebody like Salah Mahmoud. And I don't know if you're familiar with the article she wrote, I think a year ago, Secularism, Hermeneutics and Empire, which I guess is a provocative article, and for me it's also a very problematic one. Like it's partly insulting, probably not because of its language, but because of some of the shortcuts that it takes. But just to briefly capture what I guess are the stakes of that article, is a kind of, she points out a kind of coincidence or complicity between the level of a history of ideas, let's say, and the formation of certain political formations. And I put it like this because I first want to go to a historical analogy, which I think that inspires the article, which is the complicity between the Reformation in Europe, so the theological developments on the level of the Reformation, and the formation of modern capitalist society. So that's, I think, is the analogy that works in her article, when now she argues that the development of so-called moderate Islam or liberal Islam coincides with especially US, and a new kind of empire, development of empire and imperial politics. And so in that article, like one of the authors that she uses, in fact, is she refers to your work. So I was, as I said, I also find it a problematic article, but I do see the kind of coincidence that she's looking at, and I wonder what your response is to that line of criticism, focusing, so in a sense, also undermining moderate Islam or liberal Islam or Islamic Reformation in a way that I don't think is totally fair, but linking it to, let's say, hegemonic politics and especially US politics in this particular geopolitical moment. So I wonder if you have what your response to that line of criticism is, or how you problematize it, or what alternative there is, or how we should think about this. Thank you.
I wouldn't really give any kind of recipe because it's not my, my cup of tea. Okay, if I put it this way. In all these questions concerning the history of Islam, politics, etc., there is a lot of things that are missing here. In comparison between the history of Islam and the history of Christianity, how Islam emerged, in which context, in which environment, in which political and social context. Islam was born in no empire. It's not like Christianity. Christianity was born in already established empire. Okay. While Islam was born on tribal societies. And for that reason, politics became integral part of the development of Islam from very early period, during the life of Muhammad. Okay, maybe you can make a distinction between Muhammad, the Prophet in Mecca, and Muhammad, the leader of the society, and in Medina, I mean in the second half of his mission. So politics became part of it. And if we add to the historical fact that the Arabs united within Arabia, and they became able to invade the world and to establish their own empire. So empire, the Arab empire, became strongly connected to Islam. Okay. Of course, this does not create something like the church, and there was always a distinction between the political authority and the religious authority until the early 20th century. Okay. This is one dimension in which Christianity is different. Christianity was born in an established empire, so politics was not part of the founding document of Christianity. It took at least 4 centuries until some emperor decided to convert for some reason. I mean, it's not our here. And then the Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. Okay, so politicization came very late to Christianity after 400 years, while it was inherent in Islam from the very beginning. Okay. This is another difference, which is enlightenment, if I can use this term, started in Islam at the beginning. Okay. Why it started in the history of Christianity in Europe late. Okay. So rationalization and rationalism, it's not only this thinker or Averroes, it's from the 9th century. That the Mu'tazila, the rational theologian, started to put reason above revelation from the very beginning. But of course, the material became later that revelation is above reason. When we compare the change, the Reformation in Europe and Reformation in the Muslim world, I return it back to the metaphor of the lady giving birth to the child. And this is a real big difference. I mean, look here, the Reformation movement started in the late 19th century by someone, his name is Jamaluddin Afghani, supposedly from Afghanistan. So this is Afghanistan in the 19th century. Whether he was from Afghanistan or from Iran or from India, it's a different story. So this was, according to some French politician and French philosophers, Martin Luther in the 19th century. Okay, and it continued in Egypt, in India. Okay, but under the pressure of colonialism. Okay, so to a great extent, the Islamic Reformation was a polemic, apologetic. So this explains the inability of the Islamic Reformation to go into genuine reformation, which happened in the history of Christianity. And until now, the Muslim world is under the pressure, whether we talk about new empire, war against terrorism, etc., it is counterproductive to any new thought. Okay, and as we know, as long as people are caught in, are in danger, whether this danger is imaginative or is real, and I think in the Muslim world the danger is real. Okay, they have nothing to hold on, but they hold to their own very, very orthodox traditional religion. Tradition becomes here the protector of the fear of losing identity, of losing this kind. That explains to me, at least, the difficulty of reaching a genuine reformation, the difficulty that faces any intellectuals who would bring, issues into debate. People would respond in a very, very defensive way. They are afraid. Okay. They are afraid that they are going to lose their faith if any critical analysis is applied to their faith. This is what's happening, and so it's a different context that we need here, different tactics. Okay. Not always to look to the European or the Western experience as a model. Okay, because this is different historical development outside. That makes it very difficult because all the political decisions that Muhammad has to take, okay, are registered in the Quran. So that makes it the hardest mission to disconnect, okay, this historical decision registered in the Quran, okay, from what the believer would say this is the divine message of the Almighty Allah. Okay. So this kind of difficulty is internal as well as external difficulty. That's why you find most of the I wouldn't say modernist or liberal. I don't like these, these titles. Liberal Islam, modernist Islam. We need a thorough study of the history of Islam, the composition of the Islamic foundation, etc., etc., etc. So I think any comparison would lead to some sort of mixing up.
To follow up from this, another working definition of the postsecular which has emerged in the course of the lectures, one in Dr. Barker's own lecture, but another one was Professor Rappaport looking at Jewish extremisms. Another working definition of the postsecular condition has been a trend within all major monotheistic religions, all three really, to become captive to, in some way hostage to, politically conservative minorities within the religions that actually manipulate the religious issue for other purposes. I think that when Professor Susan Harding comes in June, looking at the evangelical movements in the USA, we will have the prototype of this, and the neocons and the long shadow Leo Strauss, all of that American story, which is beginning to be studied in political theory, in international relations. but not so much actually in the humanities. Now that neocons are officially over, even Fukuyama says so, we can look upon it as a particular moment. So another working definition would be this kind of rigidification that three monotheistic religions hostage to a political minority that is manipulating them. Now, I think you would be probably sort of sympathetic to this working definition of the post-secular, but this leaves a number of questions open, because those those political minorities manipulating the religious groups for their own purposes are extremely authoritarian, and they would not take very kindly to your idea that everybody can just open with respect as I'm teaching the text and just get trained. What do you do with the authoritarianism that comes with a certain takeover of religious extremism? People talk about Islam or fascism. I mean, Saba Mahmoud is a brilliant researcher, but she's looking at fascist organizations. The Brotherhood of Islam is a proto-fascist, highly authoritarian, violent organization. How do you answer this violence, this coercive force that comes from all three religions? And then Islam has a peculiar position in this, being highly manipulated as the violent religion, when in fact it is not so. It seems to me, and even historically, it is not. It is the Muslims who have invented this type of fundamentalism in inverted commas. Can you play with this? I take it that you had a question, or were you annotating my question? Because if we come back to you later, unless you want to intervene, if you have the same question as me, you can come in now.
Yeah, maybe I only want to add, like, also in post-secularism, the ideas of Habermas on the communicative theory, which is actually, if you do studies, if you study traditional mainstream Islam interpretation of the Quran, you will find a lot of these sources which are on the same line with the communicative theory. And then you can isolate the process inside Islam from all kinds of political intention. It's straight from the state or from the people who were in charge in Andalusia or so I think it's possible to find the link between the called liberal Islam or modernist Islam or whatsoever with the traditional thinking, and this can be a way through the communicative field.
By the way, Jürgen Habermas is speaking in Tilburg on March the 15th, am I correct? I think it's the 15th, Saturday.
15th.
15th. And it is at the University of Tilburg. Go on the website, register, because we had difficulties getting in last week. It was already semi-full. It costs 35 euros, but if you haven't heard Habermas speak, here is your chance.
Sold out at the university. I checked 2 days ago, sold out.
Sold out 2 days ago, well done.
Yeah, but you can go,
some cancellations at the last minute, Susanna?
You can go to another room where there's live streaming, then it costs 20 euros.
So
discount if you just get the audio and not the visual, but you'll see the grand man anyway, and you can still get in. If you haven't heard him or seen him, he's one of the grand old men of European philosophy, worth taking a trip down to Tilburg. Sorry, many multi-layered questions, you're free to avoid them all or pick and choose. The floor is yours.
Okay. Well, I would like to add, and I think Omar had this already, that it is not a minority group manipulating politically Islam. It's also the states are very much manipulating Islam. In fact, the states, the modern state, started manipulating Islam before this minority group emerged as political opposition. But as political opposition, they have to play the same game, and the game is Islam. Islam has been used and misused especially in the modern era, by political regimes. I specify the time after the abolishment of Caliphate, 1924. When most of the kings and emirs and rulers of the Muslim world, from India to Hijaz to Egypt, wanted to be appointed as the new caliph of Muslims. And the debate started whether caliphate is an Islamic system or a political system that Muslims can choose, can change. So this is the origin of the beginning of the modern manipulation of Islam, politicization of Islam, and then emerging, Muslim Brotherhood, basically in Egypt, 1928, just 4 years after the abolition of Caliphate. And it was basically a movement against what they perceived as much secularization of the Egyptian society. So it was re-Islamization of the Egyptian society. And now we are here with the process of secularization which was going on, that has been perceived as danger to faith and to Islam, and therefore, and if you listen to these groups now who are criticizing Islam or manipulating Islam, you can find that behind this invitation to Islamization, the realization of secularization, which means the Muslim society have gone through a lot of change. It's not as much as the traditional Muslim societies anymore. How can we undo, or how can we deal with this kind of damage? I think there are different ways. I mean, tradition could, and I agree again with Omar, could provide us with certain elements of debate, certain elements of certain directions of interpretation, and acceptance of diversity of interpretation in traditional work. Tradition is not one monolithic thing. Tradition is so many multiplicity of trends and thought, and so tradition here is very, very important resource. And I think to fight on tradition is very, very essential, not to fight from outside. And here, the outside and the inside is very, very important. I mean, it's very easy that you can criticize those people, condemn them, but in condemning them from outside, you condemn Islam. Because they present Islam, they claim presenting Islam. So you have to fight from inside, of course, armed with knowledge from outside. I mean, tradition is not enough. Okay. Armed from knowledge, being in contact with the world, with the modern world in which we live. Well, I'm talking here about scholars, about activists, about people who are concerned about the situation. That it could be depoliticization of Islam is possible. And it started to shine. And some of you might be very surprised to know that it is shining in Iran. Because Iran have already gone through tasting the forbidden fruit, Islamization. So the Iranians have tasted this already, have tasted what theocratic state could be. They are still suffering, but the growing resistance to this theocratic state is in Iran. Whether we are talking about intellectual, young generations, students, of course they are suffering, but they are doing much, much better than any other place in the Muslim world. This came through experience and through the availability of knowledge about tradition in the Iranian society, which is not the same in the Sunni way. And that is again would present the power of the state to control the public space. In the meantime, to keep the open debate inside the palace. But to control the public space, this is something that is still going on. There is in the Arab world now a new, they call it a new, they would like to control the media, to control satellite, to control everything, and they came with some sort of a statement of honor, something like that. I mean, if you listen to the discourse, it's all about protection, protecting the people, protecting the audience, protecting the believer, and protection means control. So freedom here is something that is used by the political authority. I mean, all the constraints about freedom is to protect the people. Instead of empowering people to be critical of what they see on the satellite or on the internet, no, we need to close up the internet and the satellite to protect the people. So intellectuals and politicians, I mean liberal politicians, I use liberal here, have to fight against this kind of political manipulation, whether it is by the state or by these minority groups. Scholars have to go deep into this critical analysis of the history of Islam. It's less yet conceivable or acceptable if to go to a critical study of the Quran. It's not yet. Okay, it's starting, but it's very, very difficult. If you go to critical study of Islamic history, critical study of Islamic tradition, so far it is not widely accepted, but it has certain room. But when it comes to the Quran, this is the real problem. But we have, I mean, to go otherwise, the other option is to be committing suicide.
Not an option.
Yeah, it's not an option for any society to commit suicide. That's why we have to work very hard. And for me, because this is part of what shall I do? I mean, besides writing books or or articles or paper or something like that, this is not enough. It's also to be engaged in, again, we return it back to the public debate, to the public, to introduce this idea to the public. Training programs. I'm ready to make a training program free of charge in my own house for those who are interested. I mean, this kind of voluntary work is, I think also is a possibility, besides being authority in the academia, something like that.
Another question, not at all critical this time. I'm wondering, because you didn't really touch upon it, I'm wondering if in your project of reformation, if you consider that, let's say, the existing mechanisms or procedures of like ijtihad, if you consider that this is what we need and we need more of it, or if you think that we also need to rethink and come up with new procedures of ijtihad. So if it's structurally something different, or only more of what we already have. And
well, thank you very much, because you brought the most exhaustive concept, ijtihad. Ijtihad, historically and practically, is not to get by critical analysis to a new idea. Is to make a choice within the available traditional ideas. When it comes to a specific issue, okay, you go and you go through all this tradition and say, well, okay, no, this opinion of this master is more suitable to our age than this. This is the limitation of ijtihad. And it is limited to the realm of law, of Sharia. Okay? There is no mujtahid in our era that is bringing, rethinking of theological dogmas or philosophical issues concerning, for example, the issue of what is revelation, what is the meaning of revelation, is the Quran the verbatim word of God, or the word of Muhammad? I mean, such questions are taboo, are not touched by any mujtahid who start from the established dogma. And so many people who speak very good language, they are just mujtahid. They are not thinkers. What we need is critical thinking beyond the dogma. To move from ijtihad to critical thinking. And to connect this critical thinking with the critical thinking that I just make presentation of Hayy al-Quran and Ibn Tufayl and Averroes. Okay. Of course, this critical thinking is belonging to the 11th, 12th century, according to the norms of thinking in the 12th century. Now we are living in, Ibn Tufayl or Averroes ignore nothing about hermeneutics or Gadamer, okay, or the complicated issue about how to read text, how to understand the text. What is the relationship between tradition, the text, and the position of the interpreter in producing the meaning? How the meaning is produced. The production of meaning is an issue that was not available to be discussed for ignorance, but this is an issue nowadays. How the meaning is forming, what kind of power and counter power in producing the meaning. These are questions that any scholar of Islam, to go beyond ijtihad, okay, and here I return back to being insider but armed with outside knowledge, if this inside outside is really valid. I don't believe it is. Okay. No, we need to go beyond ijtihad. Ijtihad is a very, very limited concept.
I take it you're satisfied with the answer? Thank you very much. Looking around the room again as we're approaching the end of the session. Yes, please, welcome. Your name?
Well, my name is Ruben. I'm a student of theology. You just said that you have hate institutions, and well, of course they can be very strict and well choke you, but they can also be an opposing force to states using Islam for religion. And would not that be a very good role for institutions to keep the states and other minorities in check, well, not in a controlling way, but say, well, you are not now really abusing Islam or any religion for your own goals?
Well, I think even if institutions are institutions to present to the majority, they control the individual. In any institutions, the individuals are interested. Within institutions, within communities, within maybe what is needed. Okay, because we always talk about what is needed, and we talk about what is needed in a context, not what is needed forever. Okay. We cannot speak about forever. What is needed in the Muslim world now, and when I say in the Muslim world, I mean the Muslim communities in the West are very much, a small copy of Muslim societies. Okay. What we need is to empower the individual in having trust in his or her own faith, as it is his or her, and no one is able to take it away. Okay, not to take protection within the collective mentality, to do as others do, to think as others think, to follow the folk. Okay, and the institutions here are very interested in making the folk follow the same route. they are the guardians of whatever values they think they do have. When the institutions collaborate with political authority, then everyone is in danger. So I'm talking about reality. Maybe if the Muslim will go across this, individualism, okay, maybe we can talk about something else. But so far, this is what needed in the Muslim community and in the Muslim community. As long as one Muslim come to a city, and I have this when I was in Japan. You come to Japan, you look for the mosque, and then you start to be one of the group. And you act according to what the group asked you to do. Some people came when I was in Japan who were not religious, never went to the mosque, never prayed, but they became very good adherents to the rules of the institution. The institution here is the group who control this mosque or this city or something like that. To the extent, and this was surprising me, looking for halal meat in Japan. I mean, you have to go to Tokyo to find an Indian Muslim butcher to have halal meat. This is Japan, for God's sake. You are not in Europe, you are not in the United States, you are in Japan. Where people, I mean, so this was an amazement to a lot of PhD students who came to study in Japan. And I was very tired of convincing them, okay, get the meat, say Bismillah, and eat it. When you say Bismillah, it is halal. But no one was convincing people with the solution because it's not coming from the institution.
Clear? Right to reply? Do you want to return? No? Thank you. One last round. Yes, you're hesitating? Come in, speak for the mic. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Serena Volpi, and I'm an Italian student. I would like to dig deeper in the concept of rethinking, in particular how it relates itself to the dogmatic nature of belief, the dogmatic nature of belief. The problem of respect, in fact, and the lack of respect seems to be linked to this dogmatic feature of religious beliefs, in particular in relation to monotheistic religions, that somewhat link people to a dogmatic vision of their belief. Wouldn't rethinking mean shaking the foundation of the dogma that for many people is the real basis of their belief and even part of their religious identity?
Yeah. Well, maybe we have different definition of dogma here, because in Christian tradition, dogma is the church, and the church is an essential part of the faith. But anyway, whether we talk about Christianity or about Islam, the dogma have been forming long time after the emergence of revelation. Okay. The dogma of Islam, which is still dominant today, have been forming from the 9th century and claimed in the 12th century as the only truth about Islam. Before that, this thinking was debated. Okay, there was a debate about the nature of God. There was no debate about the existence of God, but how we perceive God. What is the relationship between God's action and God's essence? Okay. So there was no dogma about, the Tawheed. For example, Tawheed is every Muslim thinks that this is the tenet of Islam. Before the debate, okay, if you look to the text itself, the Quran in this case, in fact, it's full of options. Options, I mean, in the plural, differentiations. God sometimes is presented as very unique. Nothing resembles him. He resembles nothing. Okay? And this is the pure, monotheism. as propagated by the rational school. So, but he is presented in other passages of the Quran as angry, as loving, as having head, face, hands, and legs. Anthropomorphism. So these are two dimensions that exist in the Quran. The Quran here, okay, does not present any dogma. Neither recite a dogma about predestination or free will. Okay. But after the dogma is established, generations of Muslims have been only able to read the Quran through the lens of the dogma. So dogmatization became so. But when I say before the dogma, and here it's very, very important to say, well, the dogma was established, formulated by human beings like us. God did not formulate the dogma. Okay. If we take the Quran as the word of God, it does not contain any dogma. It contains options, and people, according to their political and position, cultural and social position, have made some choice. To these options, this street is good. Some other people make a choice for another option. Okay? And they claimed the dogma, and then afterward, the caliph decided what the dogma, what the true dogma should be. We are returning back to the foundational sources. Okay? We are returning back to pre-dogma history of every religion, and I think Hans Kuhn is doing the same, and therefore he is excommunicated by the church. Yeah, because he is saying, look, I mean, this kind of Trinity, it's blah, 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 blah. I mean, we have to look for the heresies, the multiplicity of heresies, the discussion about the nature of Jesus, one nature, double nature, human, half human, etc., etc., etc. Okay, and if we go further before that, we can find a shared ground between Islam and Christianity and Judaism. Okay, so the dogma separates the shared ground that possibly could be established if we go before the dogma. Again, of course, it's a threat to the common believer. That's why we need the empowerment of the individual believer.
I think Hans Kuhn is one of 4 theologians who were excommunicated, and they carried their excommunication with pride. Yes, welcome. Take the mic.
My name is Gönül. Can you hear me? Okay, my name is Gönül, and thank you very much for this interesting lecture. I have a very short question. Do you think that Prophet Muhammad was a philosopher?
No.
No?
No. I wouldn't think that he was a philosopher. No, he was a human being, full of hopes, of concern about the society. You can see this in the Meccan, the religion, the Meccan people. If you read the Quran in chronological order, I mean, you can find concern about the injustice, the economic injustice, the ill treatment of the orphans, etc. So you can find the concern here, and afterward he became responsible for a community, and this added some responsibility. So we can think of the development of the infrastructure of Muhammad. But at the beginning, I think he was one of these sincere persons that was concerned about what was going on in the society, on the ground. He himself was an orphan, as you know. So if we read the biography of the Prophet from this historical perspective, we can see a human being that we can disagree with some decisions, okay? But we will never lose our respect to this person. But philosopher, no.
Thank you.
Yes? The last minute.
I'm sorry. My question, I'm Milan, first of all, and I'm from Turkey. And I want to point the issue
issue that you underlined about the link between the religion and state. I mean, from my experiences living in Turkey, there's two poles, which is repressive secularism, which was adopted since 1920s, and the other pole is that you mentioned is Islamization. But I mean, at the moment, being in between of them, I mean, the big conflict issues going on, I want to ask something about, can we think another way of defining secularism, which is not really linked to the European thought, which is, I mean, when you look from the Islamic side, you know, the re-Islamization movements are linking the secularism with European or American repressiveness, I mean, the Christianity, the repressive side of Christianity. So they are taking the whole to, I mean, re-Islamize the society, and this gives them a very good, I mean, you know, the ground to re-Islamize and to repress again the society in another pole. So can we, I mean, at least imagine another way which is secular, but I mean another definition of secularism?
Well, I think I can think of a secular society which would not be hostile to religion. A secular society which is based on law, okay, and based on equality, and based on freedom. Freedom also applied to those who preach Islamism. Okay. And if the rules of law would be strictly applied with openness to allow religion to be in the public space, not to suppress the appearance of religion in the public space. I cannot see for myself, although I'm not convincing that headscarf is a religious duty. Okay, I'm not. This is a specific interpretation that I disagree with. But I don't see the harm of allowing, you know, headscarf girls to be in universities or to be in public space or something like that. Because if we talk a secular society as the dress code is something individual. Of course, the state can interfere when this code is enforceable. Okay? And here the law will work very well. Okay? Or there is enforced marriage. Okay? The law can work here as well. Okay? But what happened in the Muslim world that it was not entirely secularism in the proper sense of secularism. It was military secularism, enforcing in the society. It is still the army who is protecting the secular society. It happens in every other place, in other countries, without, you know, taking from the constitution the article about religion. Islam is the religion of the state. I'm hoping in the Turkish context that there is a third way in between started to emerge, in between the two polarized power.
Yeah, the intellectuals.
Yeah, I can see in some people who are in the debate a third way in between in defending secularism, the separation between the state and the religion, which means the state should not manipulate religion, but in the case of Turkey, the state, the secular state, manipulated religion. Okay, so the state should not manipulate religion. In the meantime, the rules of law should be for all the citizens. Of course, if the law is formed on the basis of democracy, not on the basis of, and everything is negotiable. In a society which is open to negotiation, everything is possible. And I would like very much to see this kind of secularism. I'm against this very clearly, this article in the Constitution that Islam is the religion of the state. And sometimes I make funny as an Egyptian with the Egyptian when I say, but the state does not go to the mosque. The state does not go to the Hajj. The state does not, I mean, what is the state? Okay. Religion is for the people who believe in it, not for the state. When the state has a religion, here comes the issue of the institutions. Institutions are serving the state, they produce the meaning which will fit the state, and other people who are in favor of another meaning, they are subject to persecution. Hopefully.
Thank you very much. I was reminded, Professor Zayd, of one of my favorite philosophers, who was not a prophet but a philosopher. I was visiting his birthplace last week. I was in Sicily, the city of Syracuse, and Archimedes was, of course, the man. And the city was talking about him as if he had lived yesterday. He lived 460 years before Christ. But Magna Graecia and the perennial memory of philosophers. But Archimedes had a beautiful definition of God as a circle with the center everywhere and the circumference nowhere. And I thought that that definition is a very
divide. That it's everywhere and nowhere.
The center is everywhere, the circumference. I thought you would be sympathetic. Thank you for a wonderful lecture.